This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello all and welcome to episode 447 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will talk about Borussia Dortmund keeping the pressure on Bayern in the title race with a 6-0 win against VfL Wolfsburg in a home match, and we will preview Saturday's late game against Borussia Mönchengladbach, which is also a home game. So looking forward to that one. For all that and more, join me Matthias Zug and Lars Pollmann. First, hello Matthias, how are you doing?
Hey, Stefan, I am doing well. How are you?
I could not be better. I'm enjoying Philadelphia sunshine. It is warm. You can walk around in flip-flops. I'm loving it. And also here, pretty sure he is not wearing flip-flops right now, is Lars Pollmann. Hello, Lars. How are you?
Hello, Stefan. I do not own flip-flops.
Do you own sandals like the true German that you are?
No.
I'm glad you're back on the show, Lars. I hear you have something to promote. If you want to do that now, why don't you go ahead, since you have joined the book author club?
Yeah, I wrote a book. You can order on Amazon. All details on my Twitter profile. Let's go on with the show, Stefan.
All right. Wow. That's the great promotion we just know from German people. Anyway, yeah, it was a 6-0 win. Matthias, I'll go to you first. Wolfsburg played like a team that didn't matter. Borussia Dortmund did play relatively well, and I did not really have much time to really watch the game because I was working at the time. So, but I had it on my phone, sort of in the corner, and it did not really look like Dortmund were really troubled at any point in this game. Would you agree with that assessment?
Ish. There was obviously the one major breakaway chance for Wolfsburg, one-on-one with Kobe, that Kobe saved, where I still question whether or not that may have been offside. But other than that, it was, on the one hand, I wasn't surprised, because obviously in the preview pod, I had mentioned the high XG numbers that Wolfsburg had been conceding in the weeks prior, but hadn't conceded many goals. Well, now that basically the chickens came home to roost. You know, they're playing against a team that can score a lot of goals. In fact, Borussia Dortmund, no team since the start of the calendar year 2023 in all 5 top European leagues has scored more goals than Dortmund, who are scoring 3 per match on average, which is just insane. Defensively, I was a little surprised by Wolfsburg. Also, in an attacking sense, they played like I'm kind of expecting, maybe not to jinx things, but to like Gladbach next week in terms of, or in the next match, in terms of nothing to play for. Wolfsburg absolutely have something to play for. Gladbach have literally nothing to play for except trying to get to the summer break. And that's how Wolfsburg played. And Niko Kovac, you could tell during the match, and then in the post-match press conference, he was definitely, let's just say, somewhat frustrated by the way his team didn't show up. I mean, Dortmund just cut through them like a hot knife through butter again and again and again. And Niko Kovac even said, we're lucky that it was only 6 scored against us. And that's excluding the penalty. And I join his assessment in that Dortmund, if they would have been even more efficient, probably should have scored 8 or 9 on the day. However, for me, the one big takeaway statistically, I looked at it, shots on target percentage against Bochum, Dortmund had 31% on target. Against Wolfsburg, it was 53% on target, and roughly the same amount of shots. It was 19 versus 22, 23 the week before. So that is a huge difference maker for Dortmund right there.
Yeah, definitely. The 1-0 was a really nice looping header by Airdeyemi, as the I think international BVB Twitter account put it. And of course, I think most of the goals were pretty much Dortmund just ripping Wolfsburg to shreds on the counterattack, as you just said. Lars, do you have an explanation for why Dortmund were this successful, why Wolfsburg afforded them this much space on the break time and time again?
Wolfsburg have the fastest center half in the league in Mickey van der Veen. Sebastian Bynoe is also a pretty good athlete. And I think they kind of overrated their ability to cover a lot of spaces in behind. I think it's also a recipe for disaster for opponents of Dortmund at the moment to play a back three or back five, just because it's very difficult to contain both Airdeyemi and Malen as, you know, those half strikers, wide forwards, whatever you want to call them. And Wolfsburg kind of saw that didn't work, and never bothered to make any adjustments. So it definitely contributed to a fun game for neutrals, I guess. Obviously very fun for Dortmund fans, but for the 5 or 6 Wolfsburg fans in existence, must have been reasonably frustrating to see something being exposed in like 25 or 30 minutes and them just not bothering to change anything. So, or not necessarily change things soon enough for it to have any sort of impact on the game. So,
yeah, we had a bit of a switch at the fullback positions with Riasson playing left back and Wolf playing right back, because I think Guerrero did make the squad, but since he was sort of doubtful, maybe Tesic didn't want to risk him from the beginning. Lars, how did you see that change impact Dortmund's play for the better or worse?
I mean, obviously, Riasson had the assist for the first goal, making the switch work out in Dortmund's favor, I suppose. But ultimately, I don't think you can make the argument that either Riasson or Wolf were the deciding factor in the game. They won 6-0, so it's quite conceivable that Guerrero would have had an even bigger attacking impact just because of his playing profile. But obviously, whenever you have the opportunity to rest an important player ahead of the final stretch of the season and it works out, no complaints, I suppose.
Yeah. I don't really know how much more I have on this game other than that it was really fun. Matthias, how annoying is it that in a way the Jude Bellingham goal, I think it was the 4-0, where he just took aim from distance and Castells sort of pumped it to the crossbar, and then you had this wicked spin and it went back into the net. And there was this funny replay of a boy being in the stands with his grandfather, and his grandfather had already sort of face palmed and didn't even see the ball going in, and then was surprised to see his grandson celebrate. But how annoying is it that these kind of, I'd say, lucky bounces happen in home games, but somehow not on the road, where they arguably are more of a necessity for Dortmund?
Well, clearly it's the lack of good use of VAR. That makes all the difference. No, I don't know. I mean, it's kind of one of those things. There is a psychological proven fact that teams that play at home again in front of actual crowds, so that obviously discounts Hoffenheim and Wolfsburg, but someone like Borussia Dortmund, that gives them a push. Now, equally, also when things aren't going well, that can actually lead to more problems. That's why teams sometimes that struggle do better away from home than at home. Whereas Dortmund right now, they're just flying high in the second half of the season, and so it pushes them further and further. I thought that was an interesting goal. Unlucky for the keeper, of course. He didn't make a great save, but it was a just reward for Bellingham. He had another great match, and it was, they just let him come and shoot. I mean, I was watching and I'm like, did they not watch him ever play? And it would have been nicer if it would have just gone in straight off the bat from his shot. But this way, it kind of fit to, I would say, more to Wolfsburg's day than Dortmund's. Dortmund really didn't benefit from much luck in that sense. Airdeyemi's penalty miss kind of underlined that one. But it summed up Wolfsburg in a scene perfectly for the entire match. There is one other thing I do want to point out. Previously, as you know, Stefan, I like to sometimes take a look at how often teams cross in matches. And Dortmund against Bochum had 30 plus crosses. Against Wolfsburg, they only had 15. And the one match was a 1-1 frustrating draw, and this was a 6-0 victory. So, and arguably with Riasson and, with Wolf, you have players on there more likely to want to cross than play through the middle, which you would have with Guerrero. So I think that underlines, again, the attacking approach from Dortmund that just simply works.
Yeah. Lars, do you think that Airdeyemi and Malen, together with Aller, is the front three going forward for the, say, medium term, meaning next season, maybe the season after? Or do you think that Dortmund will find different players to put in this position? Because right now, at least for me personally, I don't really see how it's going to change if both are fit and healthy to go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see a reason why you would want to change anything about the starting three, if you like. I think there's an argument to be made that they don't really have like-for-like replacements on the bench. I mean, not even taking into account that Jamie Bynoe-Gittens is out for the rest of the season and presumably somewhat into the summer. I think that they really kind of lack a pace option off the bench if they play both Airdeyemi and Malen from the start. So that's something that perhaps you would look at. Obviously, they also signed Julien Duranville in January, and that was kind of a transfer they otherwise would have made in the summer. So maybe he starts playing a role early next season. But yeah, I mean, it works, so there's no reason to make any changes. I think we can definitely expect Aller to improve just physically, which is completely understandable after surviving cancer. I think having the summer off after whatever international games he has with Ivory Coast after the season, having a break, but also having some time to spend in the gym, getting a bit stronger, especially in the upper body, because I feel like he gets pushed around a bit in aerial duels sometimes. And yeah, just Aller getting really back into complete shape and rhythm. That should help Dortmund. He's already quite important in laying off and being a target option, if you like. But I think there's definitely more to come just in terms of scoring output. I think he's now scored 5 league goals, which is a respectable number given the circumstances. But obviously, the starting striker for Dortmund, and Aller has basically been a starting striker for months now, will ultimately be expected to score more. And I think that's also something that's quite reasonably expected of Aller. So ultimately, those three, that's pretty much how you would draw up your starting attacking lineup, because they, especially the two wingers, kind of interchangeable. Obviously, they've kind of exploded onto the scene this season after switching sides, with especially Airdeyemi being much more comfortable on the left. I think Malen is a bit more versatile in terms of being comfortable on both sides.
Who did Airdeyemi dust before he crossed it over to Aller for the 2-0 again?
Borno.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a center half of 195 or so centimeters, so it's not a fair fight, as it were. But
That's good.
Just the start-stop ability of Airdeyemi. I've made a couple of tweets over the last few weeks, but I think if you put Airdeyemi in the NFL scouting combine, he looks like a very good wide receiver. Obviously, probably a bit on the small side, because football players or soccer players, as it were, are not too muscular in comparison, but just the explosion is so evident and quite quite remarkable when you compare Airdeyemi to other professional soccer players. It doesn't really look like a fair contest.
Yeah, which is why it hurt so much when he had this assist against Hertha Berlin to Daniel Malen and tore his hamstring or thigh or calf. I'm not quite sure what it was in that action, because he is so lethal, and I wonder where he would be if it weren't for that injury. That was very annoying and at a very terrible time for Dortmund, because I think with Airdeyemi maybe you have a better game away to Chelsea, maybe you have a better game away to Bayern, etc., etc. But correct me if I'm wrong. I think those were the first Airdeyemi chance in the Westfalenstadion, and that was, I think, after he missed his penalty and then was subbed out. And in the post-game interviews, Airdeyemi was not very happy because he, of course, had the chance to score a hat-trick, but did not. Lars, I did see you on Twitter saying that you would have preferred Emre Can to take that to remain in rhythm and not go hat-trick hunting, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, I just don't really like that. Obviously, it might just be anecdotal because on Saturday, Ilkay Gündoğan had missed a penalty to make it 3 goals for Man City, and they almost dropped points because of that, or at least after that. And then Airdeyemi, who's not Dortmund's number 1, number 2, or number 3 penalty taker. I can understand it. I don't think it's necessarily a huge deal, but I just wouldn't do that if I were in charge. I would always go with my number 1 option, which might actually not be Emre Can. It might be Marco Reus when he's on the pitch. I think Airdeyemi said after the game that he asked Reus to take the penalty, that Airdeyemi could take the penalty, but given what we've seen over the last 2.5 years, I think Emre Can is by far their best penalty taker and should take all penalties, and that's just how I would deal with those things. But obviously, when it's already, I think it was after the 5-0 or whatever, so not like it's a huge deal.
Yeah. All right. Let's wrap up this Wolfsburg discussion, and maybe by quickly talking about what happened in Bremen, because I didn't see the game, but I assume you did, Matthias. Anything noteworthy to report as we all try to keep the hopes up that Bayern eventually stumble with, I guess, now 3 games remaining?
I mean, I didn't see the whole match because I had a more interesting match to follow, namely my son's. But it was another struggle in the first half for Bayern. I would say Bremen actually had some decent moments to do something, and then Gnabry, kind of uncorked it for them. XG wise, they didn't do great. I mean, it just wasn't an overly convincing Bayern performance against Bremen. Bremen, of course, are better than Hertha. And so actually played a little bit of football versus what Hertha did or didn't do. But it's hard to say. I'll be honest, I don't quite know what to make of this Bayern side. I mean, if they turn up and play to their full potential, they will win the Bundesliga because they will win the remaining 3 matches. However, they have 2, maybe 3, but I'll say 2 tricky matches now in front of them versus teams who have something to fight for. I mean, Schalke fighting for survival, who've played better in the last few weeks. The Freiburg match, where they played horrendously bad, they also had a lot of injuries. And then they take on Leipzig, who are also inconsistent, but who need victories here in the last 3 matches to solidify their Champions League position, and they've kind of been better in the last few weeks. So they're a little bit on the ascendancy. So those are the kind of the ones that I look out for this Bayern side. I'm not quite sure. I did read that Bayern look like they're going to be at full strength or near full strength heading into the Schalke match. So I honestly, the only match realistically I could see Bayern dropping points in is against Leipzig. But unfortunately, that one is in München. Not that it matters, because Leipzig home matches, it's not quite like playing against a real football team. So It's a hard one right now, but on paper, of course, Bayern should win all three.
Yeah, so I've only read the headline, but apparently Dortmund's mayor, Thomas Westphal, is... I don't even know if this is a motivation or if it's an incentive or not. It would not be for me if I were Schalke, but he said if Schalke beat Bayern or, I don't know, get a draw out of this game, they would, be invited to sign Dortmund's golden book. I don't
Which
know.
wouldn't be the first time, Stefan.
No, I was going to say it would not be the first time, because...
Which you can read all about in my book.
or in mine, to be...
In both. That best of both worlds, Stefan.
Is it what publisher is yours again?
Yes Verlag.
All right, because I think we also have the same publisher.
No, I think yours is Riva, isn't it?
Is it? Oh, well. Anywho, read in Lars's book about it. What's it called again?
Unnützes Wissen über Borussia Dortmund, which is useless facts about Dortmund. I should possibly mention that it's German only, so if you don't speak German, learn German. Specifically from my book.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone out there who doesn't speak German and needs to read Lars's book should absolutely learn German. So go ahead. It's what better reason to learn German than that? But more importantly, Lars, since you also live closest to our next opponent, I'll put on.
But a little.
Yeah, I put the onus on you to. I guess introduce us a little bit to that game. Obviously, I can tell that Borussia Mönchengladbach right now are in 10th position, and as Matthias so eloquently put it, have pretty much nothing to play for. Their away record is just 1 win, 6 draws, and 8 losses, amounting to 9 points. So similarly to Dortmund, they have been getting their majority of points at home. So... yeah, but I think this weekend they pulled off something that Dortmund couldn't quite do, namely beating Bochum 2-0. So,
at home, but it was at home.
Yeah, of course it was. So, Lars, what can we expect from Dortmund, from Gladbach, and this game overall on Saturday? And do you think the Bayern result will make a big difference beforehand or not, assuming that they will beat Schalke quite handily?
Well, starting with the last point, I don't think Dortmund are under any kind of illusion that Bayern are necessarily going to drop points against a team battling relegation. I think, just like Matthias said, the most likely avenue for Dortmund's championship is Bayern dropping points against Leipzig. Although I wouldn't discount the final match day at Cologne, just because that's going to be a very emotional affair for Cologne with Jonas Hector retiring and Timo Horn leaving the club. And luckily for Dortmund, Timo Horn is not likely to get a farewell game in goal, because he's a worse goalkeeper than Marwitz, in my opinion. What can we expect from Dortmund? I think their hope form being as it is, I don't think necessarily we have anything to worry about in that regard. I mean, as far as I remember, they've only lost 1 home game in all competitions this season. That was the freak result against Werder early in the year, or early in the season rather. The unknown is Gladbach, because this season has been very much up and down from them, not necessarily in terms of results, but in terms of performances. They obviously pulled off their regular win against Bayern, because they seemingly are the only side that beats Bayern every year, at least once. But they've also dropped points against relegation zone teams. They've looked really lethargic and lackluster in a lot of games under Daniel Farke, whom many listeners will know we've discussed a few times as a potential option for Dortmund's head coaching position.
You may or may not have bigged him up a little bit at the beginning of the season as well.
Yeah, because he's a good coach. He doesn't necessarily fit this current Gladbach side, which is also a side that everyone knows will kind of disband in the summer. I mean, Rami Benzebaini is obviously, or not necessarily obviously, but very likely coming to Dortmund. Marcus Thuram, their leading goal scorer, is also leaving the club on a free transfer. Not sure where he's going. Lars Stindl, captain, is leaving for Karlsruhe in the second division because that's where he's from. And a few others are also leaving. Pretty sure Manu Kone is going to be sold. A few others. So it's kind of been that kind of season for Gladbach where it was kind of apparent fairly early on that they were not necessarily going to be able to compete for European spots. And then the rest of the year kind of fizzled out. Remembering the first meeting ahead of the World Cup break, that was possibly the high point for Gladbach outside of the Bayern game, and kind of shows what they are capable of when everything works and the team pulled together and all that. It's just that hasn't really happened too many other times this season. So, given Dortmund definitely need to win this game, because I think it's almost impossible to conceive Dortmund winning the championship without winning 9 points from the remaining 3 games. And given Gladbach's frailties in both results and performances, I would be quite surprised if this wasn't a somewhat comprehensible Dortmund victory.
Yeah, I've very little to add. Obviously, Borussia Dortmund have been playing really well at home, not so much on the road. So, Matthias, if you look at lineup choices, I obviously don't know who has tweaked something in training during the week, but I assume Rafael Guerreiro will probably return to the starting lineup, and then I don't know who slots into right back. I assume it's Riasson, could be Wolf too. Who knows? But I think our starting 11 right now is pretty much set in stone otherwise, right?
Overall, I'd say so. I mean, Guerreiro back at left back, Riasson at right back. It'll then depend on the fitness of Schlotterbeck. Maybe he'll start ahead of Hummels.
I think we should mention how well Hummels played against Wolfsburg.
Yes, yeah, he made a couple of key tackles. Overall, he's been playing well in the last few weeks. No real complaints there, even with teams who are looking to break on the counter. In situations where that could have been a problem, like Frankfurt, Terzic was smart enough to keep Süle on the left and then Hummels on the right, because obviously that kind of counteracted what Frankfurt were trying to do on their attacks. So those are really the only 2 changes I could possibly see. Alternatively, Hummels starts, and then Schlotterbeck comes in, 60th minute, kind of get that fitness in for the last few, and to give Hummels a break, because he's not 25, he's not 24. So those are the only ones I would see, possibly changing. I mean, never change a winning team is true for a reason, because they're in a flow, they're in a groove, everyone's playing their role on and off the pitch, also on the bench. So just keep it going. I think they're very, very focused now. And this was the Wolfsburg match, which on paper I looked at as the trickiest match. When you look at where everyone is in the table and who's playing for what in the next few weeks, the fact that they were able to blow them away like they did, I think was a huge confidence boost. Now, the key thing is here that it doesn't lead to overconfidence, because, Union Berlin was a comfortable victory. And then you had the Stuttgart situation. Then they had a great victory against Frankfurt. Then you had the Bochum situation. I would say Stuttgart's different. Stuttgart was overconfidence. Bochum, we already talked about that. So the key one here is to keep the confidence high, but in check. So you don't revert back to those where you get a little bit sloppy in attack. Not so much in defense, but specifically in attack.
Yeah. Lars, correct me if I'm wrong, since you're the one working for Fußball News site. Marcus Thuram, as far as I know, has a muscular injury, and since he's Gladbach's top scorer with 13 goals to his name in this league campaign, is not going to feature. And also a sound player who has the most assists with 9, is also suspended after collecting his 5th booking against Bochum. So do you think, since these are one of the 2 biggest impact players that Gladbach have, Dortmund's day is going to be even more easy?
Well, the thing is that Thuram is actually not necessarily out, looking likely, but Farke, I think, has said something to the effect of they're still holding on hope. And considering that Thuram is off in the summer, I don't think they are necessarily going to treat him too conservatively. So if he's able to go, he's probably playing. I wasn't actually aware of player suspension. I don't think necessarily player has, and I keep saying necessarily the entire time today, been playing as a fixed member of the starting 11 too much over the last few weeks. And also Thuram, I think he scored most of his goals ahead of the World Cup break. He also had a pretty good World Cup for France. But since the return of the Bundesliga, I think he's at like 2 or 3 goals. So it's not like he's a massive danger man. He's one of those strikers who runs hot and cold in front of goal. And when he's cold, he's very cold. Missing a lot of chances usually. So I don't think it's definitely a positive for Dortmund, considering that they have the old fox, Lars Stindl, who's always playing well in big games, and the actual danger man, I would say, as we saw in the first meeting, is actually Jonas Hofmann, a former Dortmund player who's been thriving for Gladbach. He's on double-digit goals again after last season. I think he had 12 last season. He's on 10 now. So
also 8 assists.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were kind of lukewarm on Hofmann back in the day at Dortmund, but he's one of the few guys actually that has definitely improved over time away from Dortmund, and is someone to look out for. But still, I think, as I said before, given what's at stake for both teams, which is everything for Dortmund and pretty much nothing for Gladbach, I think the only aim they have for the rest of the season is staying ahead of Cologne and obviously having, a decent sending off into the summer. It's just hard for me to make the case why Gladbach should pose too much of a problem for Dortmund. Obviously, sometimes things happen, and as I said before, Gladbach have the general ability to make things difficult for good teams, but it's just a bit convoluted, in my opinion, to make that argument for Saturday evening.
All right, last question on Gladbach. Do you think we're going to get to see Dortmund's next left back in Bynoe-Gittens while he's playing on Saturday, or do you think he's not coming?
Do I think he's not playing or not coming to Dortmund?
Not coming to Dortmund. I'm pretty sure he's playing.
Yeah, I mean, it's been so widely reported that the deal is basically done, so it would be surprising if it didn't come off. The only thing that makes me hesitate, even in the slightest, is the fact that they're still trying to extend the contract with Rafa Guerreiro, and they obviously have Riasson, they have Marius Wolf, they want to sign Ivan Fresneda of Real Valladolid, so at some point there's a superfluous fullback situation, but I think they kind of made the deal with Bensebaini at a time when they weren't sure they were going to keep Guerreiro, and they weren't sure what they had in Wolf necessarily, and Riasson was still very fresh in Dortmund, so I would be very surprised if it didn't come off, but to be honest, I wouldn't entirely be disconcerted if it didn't, just because I think if they can keep Guerreiro, they still have Riasson, they might get Fresneda. I don't think that it's a huge requirement to also add Bensebaini, but then again, he's a good player, he knows the league, quite dangerous in front of goal, so it's not like having him would be a bad thing.
All right, fair enough. I mean, there are plenty of transfer rumors to discuss, but I feel like at this point of the season, we can also just wait for it to conclude and maybe have a few more facts. In the meantime, though, Matthias, we can discuss the new shirt that Dortmund will don, I guess, next season. Of course, it is the fan voted one, and I personally quite like it. It has the one corner of the Westfalenstadion on it, and otherwise is relatively sleek. Obviously, my favorite Dortmund kit is always just a clean yellow and or a clean black. But as we all know, I just hardly ever get that. So since we discussed it in the pre-pod and you guys were not as psyched as I was, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, I like the idea of including the Westfalenstadion in it simply because of the 50th anniversary of the stadium. So that definitely gets a bonus point from me. The overall look of it, it's okay. I like this season's Bundesliga kit because it's, like you said, it's pretty clean, pretty straightforward. I also grew up as a big Dortmund fan in the 80s and 90s, so you know the neons are somehow near and dear to my heart. But no, it's fine. I have no major issues with it. I think if someone's not a Dortmund fan, they're not gonna understand the reference to the Westfalenstadion. And it won't really, like, on a screen on your computer, it looks great in the sense you can really see it. It'll look fun probably on FIFA or Football Manager, but when you're just watching it live, it probably won't come off that great, to be honest. But I do like the incorporation of the stadium.
That's what are your thoughts?
In theory, I do like the nod to the Westfalenstadion, as Matthias said, the 50-year anniversary.
However,
in 24, so that's a nice thought, but just the execution to me is absolutely abysmal. I mean, as Matthias alluded to, when players are running around on the pitch, it's going to just look like a black smudge on the front of the shirt. I can definitely see already how it's going to clash terribly with whenever they have to wear the yellow shorts. So, for example, they seem to always wear them at Leverkusen. That's going to look absolutely horrible from what I can gather right now, because obviously we've only seen, empty jerseys without players wearing them, without the full kit. So it might be a bit premature of me to be so grossed out almost by the design, but I just absolutely hate it. And I think the kit contest had a lot of potential. A lot of the designs that we've seen, even ones they haven't actually pre-selected, were much better in my opinion. Of the 9 you could vote on, there were at least 4 or 5 that I liked much better than this. A couple of those were neon, which would have been a nice nod to seasons past as well. Especially for the full season kit, because we've only gotten one neon Sondertrikot and one horrendous neon cup jersey a couple years back, which was the worst neon jersey you could design, and actually caused a bit of a ruckus because they forgot or didn't care to put the logo on the jersey at first, if people remember. So I think the idea of the kit contest was great, but pre-selecting 9 might have been a bit too much, because it basically means that the winning jersey might have won with a vote share of, I mean, we don't have to go extreme, like it might have won with like 30%. That would be probably a fairly decent majority, but it would also mean that 70% of people didn't want it. So maybe they should have made a tighter pre-selection, or maybe do a couple of rounds of voting or whatever. So, because it's not just me not liking the design, it's a lot of people, at least on social media. Obviously that always happens and would happen regardless of the actual design, but it seems to me there's more pushback than normal on the design. I don't like it personally. I think it looks like a cheap T-shirt almost, especially with the upper part just being yellow with a black band around the neck. It just looks cheap to me. I could go on and on, but I don't want to bore people listening to this episode. Everybody has their own opinions on jerseys, and clothing and fashion and whatever. But I really, really do not like it.
Well, here are my final thoughts on this. First of all, from the pre-selection that we had, I voted for other shirts ahead of this one. And second of all, I don't think Dortmund will produce a really great shirt until we find a better sponsor, because the one-on-one logo is just absolute barf. First of all, it's a very much not prestigious company, so it kind of like already looks cheap because it gets besmirched by this shitty ass company that is paying Dortmund. I just cannot take 1&1 seriously. I'm sorry. They have always been a clown show from their very conception. So that is obviously something Dortmund need to fix, and Carsten Kramer needs to find better, maybe more premium sponsors. I don't care, but we need a nicer logo on there since it's unavoidable to have one. The other part is I do think we're probably going to see the away jersey a little bit more often in games, like you said, maybe against Leverkusen and such, because of the black part. So might as well go full black anyway in a lot of games, which I personally am not against. And I'm I guess looking more forward to the cup shirt edition, but that all being said, I haven't purchased it yet, but I will definitely buy this season's home kit because I think this is one of the better ones in recent years, and I don't really like spending that much money on shirts that I hardly ever wear anyway. So I'm just gonna wait for it to go on sale at some point, and then there's that. So obviously, this episode I feel like is a little bit sort of in between things because Bayern haven't dropped points, nothing really happened in the table, there's not that much controversy to go over, so this is a bit of a shorter one, but I'm actually quite grateful for it because I have enough stuff to do, and I think you guys want to watch Champions League in a little bit. So Lars, if you want to promote your book one more time, please go ahead.
No, I'm not going to promote my book, which you can buy on Amazon and everywhere else where you can find good books. It's not necessarily, but it is called Unnützes Wissen über Borussia Dortmund. What critics say is the book about Dortmund written by one of the hosts of this podcast, Stefan.
Very good, very good. Matthias, do you have any book recommendations?
Book recommendations, yes. Powers and Thrones by Dan Jones.
All right, cool. On that note, goodbye.